On this episode of the Hockey IQ podcast is part 2 of Doug Revak, my brother. We're getting into specifics on goalies. If you haven't heard the first one, also dive into that one. It's real fun. A lot of good stories and just good times overall, and seeing his journey from youth to AAA and beyond. So really excited to share this one. Let's talk some goaltending. I feel like a lot of goalies do this, and once you've kind of done with your competitive career, it seems like a lot of goalies are done stopping pucks and they just want to score goals. So I remember going to alumni games and Doug Revak was not in net unless he had to be in net. What's the reason of this? I'm curious of why so many goalies just give up the position and are like, I want to be a goal scorer, and they're phenomenal goal scorers, so they know exactly what to do.
I do like to score goals. I think it's multiple things, but like when you've been scored on your entire life, like the last, you just want to score some goals. You're kind of sick of being that. But also on a more serious note, it's like it's one of those things that I didn't play at all that high of a level, but a high enough level that I can't just pick it up and be exactly how I was when I was playing. So I think it's more of like a frustration thing. And I'm a pretty competitive guy over the years. So I think that's like the biggest frustration is just like getting back in the net and not being able to do some of the things that I used to do in the crease. And that's really like the biggest thing for me is just, knowing what to do, knowing that I have done it and not being able to do it at that moment is the biggest frustration. So it's way more fun to be on your line and just sit on the back door and tap in pucks and score goals rather than, keep getting hit in the head and ears ringing. And I'd rather score some goals rather than that.
Yeah, I feel the same way with I never had a strong shot, but, sitting at a desk and having a desk job for the last, 7 to almost 10 years now, like I got a muffin. Like I can't score like I used to. So suddenly I'm, playing more defense, you move away and I pick up your goalie pads and now I'm in the net. It's like that extra challenge because you're not at your peak performance anymore. Like things go away. So I 100% feel that. It's the same way, like more defense, more, I put on the pads and play goalie and, C League or D League, whatever. Like it's fun. The one thing about goaltending I really do enjoy is that FU energy of like when you make that glove save that you really probably shouldn't have, like, oh man, I'm not sure there's anything like I've scored some nice overtime goals and been hyped up, but I don't know, even in just like pickup that one save where you're like, boom, gotcha, nothing better.
That is the best, and especially when it's against your brother. I love making those were my favorite saves, whether they were in practice or alumni games. I still enjoy making those saves. But you got to remember, I was even when I was in net growing up, I would play summer league. So I've been curating this skill set as a forward for a long time. It wasn't just post goaltending career. I would do it as much as I could in the summer. So I don't know where you think I got this bearing ability, but it didn't happen overnight.
Well, the great thing of actually putting the pads on myself later in life was like, now I know the exact push of like, oh, I can throw a puck underneath this pad right here. Like I know how the goalie moves, and no matter what, like I gotcha.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. There's one move that's in the NHL right now that I see a lot. That's a direct kind of when you bring that up, it really comes to mind, and it's the move. If you're a left-hander going against a normal, left catching goaltender, and you come down to the goaltender's blocker side and come in and you make a slight move towards the middle, and you basically wait for them to start their push and then throw it in between their stick and their right skate. And when you're a goalie, you really recognize how hard that is, to get your pad down, because, when you're making that push with that skate, your pad is on its way down, but it's not there quite yet. And it's really difficult to, really put your pad, straight to the ice versus the other one, because, you're using that as your push leg. So I think that's one, when you're a goaltender, you realize how difficult that one is to stop. And it looks ridiculous today when you see it, you're like, why didn't that guy just like go down in his butterfly? And it's not that easy, because he's using that as this push leg. He's starting his movement. But when you are in the net, I think that's one that you develop appreciation for and understand that how vulnerable that is.
Oh yeah, and I've tweeted out about that and have video clips of that. Like it's something. I mean, obviously I picked it up earlier in life than actually putting the pads on, but like that's a massive one. It's just pretty much impossible, which is being a righty is so disappointing. Like I really don't have that because a lot of guys trail their stick when they're coming from that glove side going to the other way. So it's really not open, but like I can think of like Kyle Connor's probably scored like 7 or 8 goals in the past 2 seasons with that exact move. And sometimes on a breakaway, sometimes it's just in zone play. Like it's a hard save to make for goalies. But I think from a shooting perspective, understanding the plant foot and which ones they have to push with versus that leading leg, like you can throw that leg down early when you're leading into it, but that push leg, like it's coming down when it's coming down. You can work a little bit on driving knees, and I know that's a big thing. Like Mitch Korn's huge on is really like driving those knees down, but it's such a difficult save, especially for new goalies and even guys in the NHL. We've seen it over and over again. So I'm curious, maybe some other things that you've picked up on just with the pros, things that they do, vulnerabilities they have, or just goaltending in general here.
A few things come to mind. I think post play is the biggest one, right? I think that's the biggest one of conversation and probably the one that I'm most opinionated on. And, I think back to Jonathan Quick, when he started to use the reverse VH, I mean, really in the NHL, he was kind of the pioneer of that and was just so dynamic coming off of his post. And I think before that, in the normal VH, there were so many vulnerabilities with that one, biggest one being kind of movement out of that position. It was fine for really in tight plays where knew a shot was coming. But as soon as you went backdoor, it's a very awkward movement from a physical perspective to push off of a completely vertical leg. So I think it was revolutionary what Jonathan Quick, was able to do, and a bunch of guys, followed him.
Yeah, like even when I remember getting into net for the first time and like doing the, I knew the RVH versus the VH, and I was testing around with it, but like if that leg is perfectly vertical, like square to that post, it's like impossible to do anything fast. Like you have to cheat a little bit off it, and then there's that hole, and now you're kind of getting picked. Like it's tough. Or like a jam play where like there's a guy back door, like you need to move, and now you've got that 5 holes. Like that's kind of tough. And for the listeners, RVH means, and the VH versus RVH is basically vertical and horizontal. So vertical is that leg is straight up and down. Horizontal, it's flat like in a butterfly. So like how we're talking about it. So if we're saying VH, that post leg is vertical, the other one is going to be down. RVH is the reverse of that. You've got the butterfly leg close to the post, the other leg's more up. So interesting way of going about it, but it's really tough.
Yeah, and I think I learned about. I really started, like you said, it's really an awkward movement coming out of the VH with your leg totally up against the post, and I struggled with that, and I got absolutely toasted so many times and was very frustrated with that movement. But it was kind of the mainstream movement at the time, and how you were supposed to play on the post. And then I remember working with Dave Marlin one summer out in Philadelphia, and he had a guest goalie coach who was an NHL guy at the time working for the Blues, and his name was Corey Hirsch, which was a big name goalie coach, and was unfortunately the recipient of the original Forsberg move when he was playing for Team Canada in, I think, 1994.
94 Lillehammer, yeah.
Anyway, so Corey Hirsch was the goalie coach of the St. Louis Blues, and he had a relationship with Dave Marlin, and came out to a camp, and he was the one that really, I had seen Quick and some of the other NHL guys do it in the past, and he was the one that really sat down and taught it from a technical perspective, and that was a game changer for me. I think it was just such way more dynamic coming off the post, and I mentioned it a couple times, but a lot of goaltending is just probabilities and putting yourself in the best position possible to make the save. And sometimes you get toasted, and hopefully a lot of times you make the save. And this was a movement that I felt like drastically improved the probability of making saves, you know, on the post and moving off the post for backdoor plays or out front plays. And Corey Hirsch was really the one that sat down and was the one that really taught me how to properly use that post. And it's such an awkward one at first, right? Like anybody that's been in the net and has tried that movement at first, like it's super awkward and you have absolutely no power until you figure out exactly how to do it and what works for your body. And then it becomes an absolute asset.
Well, I think that's kind of like the new, if you're on the cutting edge of talking goaltending these days, you know, In Goal Magazine, you know, I'll give a shout out to them. I think it's great. And we've had Kevin Woodley on the podcast in the past. Like how you play the post is so vital because you're coming in and out of it so often. And then what's the perfect scenario in each one? Like when should you use VH versus an RVH? And like that's massive, massive, massive. And everyone's going like RVH fails. And it's like, was it really? I mean, that might have been the best thing at the time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. On 2 points there. You know, number one, post play is so key because if you really think about it, like the most dangerous part of the ice is the middle of the ice, right? And so teams defensively are trying to take away the middle of the ice as much as possible and keep guys to the outside. So where's most of the play come from? The outside, which is, you know, on the post or darn near close to the post. And so I think that's why it's so key. Because a lot of the play is out there, right? So and second point is you see a lot of criticism when guys get beat. They're in the reverse VH, and maybe they get beat high or somewhere else, and you say, "Oh, why didn't you just stand there and it would have hit you?" And I think that's like the complete wrong way to look at it, right? Because again, thinking about it from a statistic standpoint, most of the time you're in the right position. It's just the one time that something happened that you got beat and everyone, you know, it's more glaring and everyone hops on you for it. But most of the time that was the right decision. And, you know, we talk about it all the time of, you know, did you make the right decision to get the wrong result, or did you make the wrong decision to get the right result? And that sort of thing. So I think post play is so key, and guys get criticized for it because, you know, quote unquote, they let in bad goals from the side, but you know, 9 times out of 10, they're making the right decision.
It's funny you mention that because, you know, I was clipping RVH failed, like bad timing, like you should be on your feet here, blah, blah, blah. And I forget what it was. And I think it was last playoffs. I tweeted out about this, but basically like someone got beat from weird angle behind the net. Like it bounced off them because they weren't in the RVH and they were standing up and it went off their opposite skate or off their knee or something like that. And it's like, well, maybe he should have been down there. And, you know, but it was weird because I think it was the game, it was like a few games prior, he got beat with a bad RVH. So you're like, you probably had a conversation with the coach. The coach was mad. The goalie coach, you know, was like, okay, well, we got to change this for the coach. And then he gets burned on something that was like, okay, if he would have kept what he had been doing, he would have been just fine. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, you got to choose.
No, and I think that's totally right. And you know, I see it all the time when I watch NHL games. And you know, the thing I think about is like, you know, for old school coaches, they're like, well, why don't you just stay on your feet and stand there? It's you know, a low angle play. It's like, well, you know, a lot of times guys are making passes out front. There's tip plays, and a lot of the stuff that comes in is kind of on the lower end of the net. And if you're just standing there, there's a ton of holes, right? But if you're in that reverse VH, you're, you know, taking away angles down low, you're sealing holes. And so you're guarding against a lot of those in tight plays, you know, whether it goes off of skates, you know, your defenseman skate or someone else's skate, someone else's stick in tight, you know, you're guarding against a lot of that where if you just stood there, you'd have no chance. So I think it's a total misnomer. It's kind of more old school type thought. But if you really break it down, like what the goaltenders in the NHL are doing, like they're just trying to put themselves in the best position to make saves.
And that comes to like, how do you quantify, or like, that's the most impossible thing. Like how many coaches don't know goaltending for jack squad, and, you know, they just want the saves. Right. And it's like, how do you quantify to that coach, like how many saves you're now making because you're able to move off the post because of an RVH or something like that? Like you're stopping more. Yeah. You let in one bad goal, but you've just saved, you know, 7 or 8 ones that you normally wouldn't have gotten. Like, Ian Clark, classic example with Bobrovsky, like transformed the guy, and it went from, maybe there's just a soft one here and there, but then he's making how many unbelievable saves, and boom, now he's getting a $10 million paycheck per year from the Florida Panthers. 0% state tax, love it. So that's pretty awesome. One thing I did want to talk about from a technical standpoint on goaltending here is moving on your feet. Like, that's a big thing I hear right now, is to make sure, if you can get your feet as a goalie. Why is that a big thing? And it's something I see a ton of at the youth levels, guys moving down in the butterfly and then getting to their feet once they hit their spot.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, to really put it simply, the play just moves so fast, and it's much quicker and more efficient to be on your feet and make safe selections from your feet. I think guys at lower levels like to slide around in their crease, which is good in some scenarios, but your baseline kind of default should always be to be on your feet for as long as possible.
And for me, it just seems a lot sloppier. When you're moving on your feet, you can be a lot more precise on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a more controlled movement, right? You can control your upper body more while you're on your feet versus the lower body. Your hands are swinging, your stick is swinging, and it really takes a lot more precision when you're sliding around to, get your head turned in the right direction to make a quick movement to the other side versus, when you're on your feet, you're able to make those sort of quick movements. And as the play, moves from, across the ice, as it does more so now than ever, it's much more efficient to move from your feet into save selections rather than, sliding around.
Yeah. It's definitely something. And I don't know if it has something to do with laziness, but the goalies that I've coached that you would put maybe on more the lazy side seem to slide around more. Like, you can tell, like, someone's a really hard worker and really has a determination to put themselves in good spots if they move more on their feet. Now, that's a huge blanket statement, so it's not 100% true, but from a tendency standpoint, as a coaching standpoint, that's what I've seen so far, is like, if you just basically stay on your knees the entire time and move around, even if the puck's at the point, like 90% of the time, you're either one, dead tired and we got problems there, or you're being lazy on the puck and now we really got problems.
Yeah, you're either lazy, but no, I mean, I honestly think it's more of like a compensation. They're just not confident moving on their feet, which I think is absolutely essential for any goaltender, is to be, an unbelievable skater in the net and be able to move in a crisp manner. And the game moves so quickly, especially as you move up levels. It's really difficult to make saves as you're sliding around. And you were talking about Saros, and he's the absolute best example of a guy that stays on his feet for as long as possible. And even if he's down, tries to get back to his feet to read the play and make decisions from there. I think for any young goaltender who's, learning how to slide, it's so key to understand when to use those movements and when to, stay on your feet, because as you move up, you don't have as much time. And I think, moving from your feet is a much quicker way to move rather than, doing a lateral adjustment. So, if you're on a 2-on-1, pass goes to the one side, you slide and pass goes back to the other side, right? It's a much more slow, laborious movement to make the adjustment, while you're down on your knees versus like a quick T push to a quick T push, right? And so, goalies get exposed as they move up into higher levels and they learn. But it's such a key, and you watch any great NHL goaltender and his movements, it's all small movements on his feet.
Yeah, it's like that beautiful goaltending. Every single shot ends with a puck hitting your chest or right in the webbing of your glove because you've already set it up.
And on somewhat of a separate note, but just talking about higher level goaltenders, one of the things that I realized, and I don't know how much you probably know more on the research side, but one of the things I realized as I got older and started really paying attention to high level goaltenders was, at a certain point, like you're big enough to cover a lot of the net. And what I realized was a lot of the goaltenders would, goals would go in kind of through them and rather than around them. And so I think even as what you want to call it, smaller guys, bigger guys, I think a lot of goals for a variety of reasons, speed, tips, shot locations, whatever. I think a lot of goals go in kind of around or through you versus around you. And so I think as you go up in levels, one of the key things to really pay attention to is sealing kind of the inside of the net outward versus, looking for those kind of off the post in snipe shots, right? Because most of the plays are coming in towards the middle of the net. And if you can cover those up, you're gonna save a lot more pucks versus thinking about the 2 out of 10 shots that are going to ring off the post and in versus the 8 out of 10 that are coming more through the middle, getting tipped by sticks, getting tipped by skates or whatever, and sealing up and being so solid on pucks that are like in and around your body, your arms.
Yeah, so I've had a few conversations with Mitch Korn, and I've been lucky enough to know someone who's a good friend with Mitch. So I've had some access to him that maybe others haven't. But like even in those short, brief conversations, like that was one of the things he brought up with his goalies. And like anytime I watch a goal that goes, and you don't, if you've seen someone who's worked with Mitch Korn for a while, they never get scored through them. It's always around them. So anytime I see a new goalie where a puck goes through, I'm like, ooh, him and Mitch are gonna have a fun conversation tomorrow in the video room. Like that's gonna be rough. It's the whole thing of never through you, always around or above you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mitch is obviously like the king, and he's got a lot of notable goaltenders. But in my view, one of the goaltenders that he had the biggest impact on and transformed the most was Philip Grubauer. And maybe not the guy you think of when you think of Mitch Korn, but Grubauer was the guy that came out of the O and was a talent and very dynamic. But when he got to Washington, and sat behind Holtby for a while, like you really saw his game tighten up and become a lot more crisp and efficient. And then, when he went to Colorado, a lot of people were saying like, oh, I don't know if he's a starter. I don't know if he's at that level. And then obviously he proved you wrong, right? But if you look back when he came into the NHL to what his style and how he played in the net versus when he got to Colorado after being with Mitch a few years, I mean, what a drastic change. And like I said, maybe not the most like notable guy that Mitch has ever worked with, but in my view, he's one of the guys that a lot of Mitch's philosophies, he was able to implement in his game and really transformed his career.
Well, you just think about pretty much all of the backup goalies. They're like, if you're a backup goalie on a team that Mitch Korn's a part of, like you've got the best education ever. Like I think about all of those guys that went through Washington, Phoenix Copley, Grubauer, even like Justin Peters is really solid. Holtby hasn't been the same since he left. I'm missing guys. There's 2 other good ones that were really nice guys out of there, or just anything like, and it's the same thing. Like you see that they're so solid, they take away all of the obvious things. You don't see many bad goals, and he just exactly what you said, like tightens them up. It's like I feel like it's Mitch Korn, Allaire's like the 2 big goalie coaches that should be in the Hall of Fame, and there's a bunch of other good ones out there. But those guys, they say pretty much the exact same thing. I mean, look at Marc-Andre Fleury working with Allaire for 20 plus years now. Like, you never score through him. The elbows are solid, they're tight. You got to go around them. It takes a lot to beat them because you can't just give a shot and be like, oh, here's how they're going to react because they're already 2 steps ahead of you because they've got such great fundamentals. They've been there and have had good tools. So no, that's awesome. I got one other question about the game here, because I think that of all the goalies I've ever been against, again, I've played against some D1, some pro guys and pickup hockey and some summer stuff, but like there's no better breakaway goalie than Doug Revak. Like for my money, no one's better. Like what are you doing back there? Because it's so frustrating. Like I'm better off, shooting a muffin from the top of the circles through a screen than going on a breakaway.
I let in plenty of bad goals from far out to compensate for some of my breakaway success. But yeah, no, never lost a shootout in my life, which is kind of crazy. Not that I've been in a ton, but yeah, I don't know exactly what it was, but I just really enjoy kind of the one-on-one scenario and being able to make a difference. And I like I said, as you know, I'm super competitive, and that's like kind of the situation that you can be most competitive in is just, you know, me versus you, and I'm gonna try and win. So I really enjoyed, you know, some guys succumb to the pressure, and when the pressure's on, you know, they crumble or maybe their game fails in certain scenarios. But for me, I always really enjoyed the pressure and try to embrace it. It's, you know, it's the most, it's there's pressure and you're nervous because it's like the most meaningful moments. And this, you know, for those, it was always so fun, and I really enjoyed kind of that pressure. And it, for me, you know, in many walks of life, but specifically hockey, in those moments, it was, as the pressure got mounted, I just got more focused. And, you know, for other people, it's the opposite. But for me, I just kind of locked in. You know, and I thought about, I had a friend most recently who's a golf guy, and he went really far in the U.S. Mid-Am. And we were talking about, he actually made it to the Final Four, which was absolutely incredible. It was a long shot. And you know, guys in the office were talking, and, you know, they were like, oh, I would have crumbled under the pressure, and I don't know how he's doing. And you know, in my mind, I was kind of saying to myself, like, I know exactly how he's doing. He just absolutely locked in, wasn't really thinking about anything on the outside world. Like, he was just so focused on what he was doing and every single swing and every single shot that he was making. And that was kind of like my approach during those moments. It was just, you know, I was just so locked in. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was just thinking about the guy that was coming down on me, and was able to lock in. And you know, I don't know if it was any specific like physical attributes, but it was just more of like a mindset of, you know, enjoying those moments and being so focused on what I was doing.
Well, it's kind of coming back to that mindset of being excited and being anxious are the exact same emotion. It's just what lens do you see it through? Like, I get excited. Like, me and you are both guys that we handle pressure very well. I don't know if it was dad or mom or whatever was in our upbringing, but like, we definitely saw the opportunity to make a difference and love the moment.
Well, we'll see on my best man speech tomorrow how nervous I am under pressure, but I think I'll be
Unbelievable. This guy is cool. Is he could sell ice to the guys making igloos, you know, like, unbelievable. So he'll be just fine. So I'm curious though on your process of handling a breakaway. Do you want to get depth? I mean, I've seen a lot of NHL goalies that have stopped getting depth now on breakaways and more just kind of stand there and just a little swivel. And then, you know, you've got the olden days, even think back to the Mighty Ducks with Conway. Like, the Iceland goalie literally like almost came out to the blue line before coming on back and getting that backward momentum. You know, what's a Doug Revak process?
right. Yeah, it's a good one. I think, you know, I remember watching guys in the NHL when I was really keyed in on the different type of goalies, and the ones that were great. You know, I think back to guys like Henrik Lundqvist and Roberto Luongo, phenomenal goaltenders, Hall of Fame goaltenders, but they sucked at the shootout. Like, you get into a shootout, and as good as they were, like, I would choose the other guy because they were generally guys that played deep. You know, didn't have a lot of speed or mobility. You know, uber talented guys, but just the shootout wasn't really made for their type of game. And I think, you know, for me, I really try to one, you know, match speed, and really, you know, think about the type of moves that could come from the pace that the guy at me is coming at. And, you know, whether that was really quick and maybe I had to play a little bit deep because I knew he could get around me quick, or if a guy was coming a little bit slower, you know, come out a little bit more, match his speed, you know, let him make the first move and be patient. But you know, I think about how some of those other guys that, you know, if you stay deep all the time, it's, you know, very predictable. And that was one thing that I didn't want to be, was predictable. So, you know, you pick up things over time to just, you know, I always think about being dynamic, and that's a word that I always thought about, was being dynamic and not predictable. so whether you throw in a fake poke check or, you give the glove side and then take it away, wherever it is, I think the more that you can change up and make the shooter think about what they're doing, the better, versus saying, oh, I'm going out on a goaltender, here's his tendency, I kind of know how to beat him. I wanted the shooter to be like, I don't know what this goaltender is going to do. I've seen him do 10 different things. I don't know what I'm going to get this one. So, those were just little competitive advantages that I tried to implement in the game. My favorite was definitely the fake poke check.
Yeah, that was the most frustrating part. Is like, I've seen you a million times, being your brother. Like, I've been on a million breakaways since, we were 7 and 4. Like, it's been there, done that. And every time I'm like, that was general framework, but at the same time, like, he'll play it slightly different. Like, sometimes he's going to come out really far, sometimes back a little bit. So he's like, it's that mano-y-mano mindset I think you had that, I did the exact same thing with goalies, and it was kind of weird having someone actually give it back to you as a shooter, like actually playing that gamesmanship. Because I feel like most goalies are so ritual based that it's very easy to understand kind of what you're going to get and how to beat it. Like, now I'm playing men's league, like, it's relatively easy. Like, if I get a breakaway, not that I can't because I don't have the wheels anymore, but like, I know what I'm going to do and have the idea to beat him. Like, does a guy get really explosive and open the 5-hole? Does a guy sit back and you go around? I'm like, it's not that hard. But then you get random Doug Revaks out there in the world that really mess with your head, and you're like, this stinks. Like, now I kind of have to like just go and dictate on what I'm good at rather than being able to really read the goalie and be like, okay, I got you here.
Yeah, I mean, the more thinking that you can make the opposition do, the better, right? Like, make them uncomfortable, make them indecisive. Because the best shootout guys are very decisive. They know exactly like what they're going to do. And the guys that panic on shootouts are the ones that are saying to themselves, like, I don't know what move I'm going to do because I don't know what he's going to do. And then you just, end up, throwing a weak shot in there. So I think the unpredictability of, from both sides, really, from shooter, from goaltender, the more unpredictable you can be, the more success that you're going to have in those sort of situations.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better. Covered a lot of ground here, and obviously we could probably have a second and third conversation. You and I have talked for many hours, but I'm curious, anything that you want to bring up, that I haven't touched on? I mean, you know my knowledge better than anyone.
Well, I don't know if there's anything in particular I want to touch on from the framework of your podcast, but don't want to downplay. I don't know if you've ever tooted your own horn, but there's someone here that's watched you for a long, long time. I will be the one to toot your horn, but it was always fun watching you. I think a lot of the things that we talked about today, you had in your game, unpredictability and doing things a little bit different. Most notably, the Greg Revak signature move of a fake drop pass that, you were the first one I've ever seen do it. And I don't know if I've ever seen, many players do it since. But you had a great game and were super smart in the way that you played, and, sort of moves like that kind of separated you from the pack. So I nothing that I really want to bring up, but do want to toot your horn while I have the opportunity, having known you for my entire life.
I appreciate that. And I will claim to be the originator because I hadn't seen it, and it just came to me one day, and I've never seen it. I haven't seen it in the NHL or any other level, but I'll play by play this real quick for the listeners here. Basically, I love to use this move when you're dragging up a defenseman. You're basically coming from the corner, you're working up the elbow there, working up the half wall into the elbow of the top of the circle there. And at that time, you're usually dragging a defenseman with you. You got a winger there, and then you've got your defenseman. So there's like this mini 2-on-2 playing out, right? And it's a perfect situation where a defenseman can dive down, or you can go around and give them that drop pass as you're trying to like take guys with you. Well, as you age, like, guys understand this, players understand this. So what I do is I would throw a backhander into my right skate. So you would think that it's a drop pass and it's going to the other guy, and I would kick that puck right back up. And guys had even seen it before, and I've done it on before. It was hilarious how they would still fall for it. Like your reaction to automatically go to where the puck is. So you would do the fake drop pass. Both of those guys go with this D at the far point, and you're just coming down the slot with a, really nice shot, or you fake the shot and go backdoor for an easy tap in. I know the Sedins did one where they kind of just like waved their stick over it, but I've never seen anyone kind of put it in their skate. Similar maybe to that Pavel Bure goal where he dropped it into his skate, kicked it up, and went from there. So I love the fake drop pass. I'm hoping to send that to someone here soon in the NHL and see it be done, because I think it's super effective and had a ton of success. I think it's only been stopped once, but he had seen it probably 4 or 5 times in practice before that actually happened, and came across him in a college game. So that was fun. So I appreciate the kind words. Definitely was a cerebral player. I'll agree with that, but I feel like both of our games were very cerebral, observational, being unpredictable. So it doesn't fall far from the tree here, but you and me both, but we know the goalie was the better one.
I don't know about that, but no, I think that, I mean, not surprisingly, that's kind of the theme of the podcast, right? Kind of hockey IQ and us growing up and playing it the way that we did. I think we appreciate that and have a little bit better understanding than maybe some other folks. So no, I appreciate you having me on, and it's great to be with you in person for the first live podcast. And want to give a shout out to you and all the work that you and Dan have been doing on this podcast. It's fantastic, and I think a lot of people benefit from it. So appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. It's always nice when we can get together for the first time in a long time.
Cool. Appreciate it, Greg.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. So before we let you go, though, we'd like to remind you to please like our podcast, subscribe to it, give us a follow, and share this with all the hockey people in your life. We really appreciate growing this community, this podcast. Remember, we also have a newsletter, the Hockey IQ newsletter as well. Really excited to continue to grow this. So please help us grow this further by liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with everyone. So appreciate you all. Take care.